There are thousands, if not millions, of best chocolate chip cookie recipes out there. A few years ago, I decided to throw my hat in the ring and I was going to develop my own best ever chocolate chip cookie, and it went horribly wrong. All of my taste testers said these are not the best cookies, these are the worst. Every person who tried this recipe said it ruined every other cookie out there for them. While those big, thick gourmet cookies are really popular right now, this recipe sort of flies in the face of that. It yields thin, chewy cookies with crisp edges. They're soft and chocolatey, and they even have a secret ingredient, which is my game changer. The first ingredient we need is a cup of butter. Now we're going to go ahead and melt the butter. I wanted a chewy, flavorful cookie with crisp edges, and the best way to achieve this is to use melted butter. No creaming. Creaming butter and sugar together creates little air pockets. Melted butter skips all of that and it makes a denser dough that helps make a really nice, soft, chewy cookie. Melt it, but you don't want it to feel warm to the touch. If it's starting to re-solidify a little bit, that's actually even better, but just so long as it's not warm, you can move on to the next step. If you watch my sugar and cookies video, you will recognize that this recipe has a high ratio of sugar, which again is important to getting that thinner texture and that super chewy texture with those crisp edges. We're using 1.5 cups of firmly packed light brown sugar, and we still need some granulated sugar. We're just using a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. Now, in many of my recipes, I'll split the difference and use half light and half dark brown sugar. You can certainly do that here, but we have a lot of richness, so I didn't feel like it was necessary like I do with my brown butter cookies or my other chocolate chip cookies I've shared. Stir the butter and sugar together, them nicely combined. Next, we'll add our eggs. We're using 2 large eggs for this recipe. Since our butter is melted and not cold, we want our eggs to be room temperature. Cold eggs can kind of shock the dough and make it harder to incorporate evenly, so warm eggs are best. Let's get our first egg mixed in. Another nice thing about this recipe is there's no mixer required. Everything is very easy to stir together by hand because we are using melted butter. So another thing that makes them so dangerous is they can be made so relatively quickly and easily. All right, your next egg, mix in the second egg. Now the more vigorously you whisk on the eggs, the more crackly the surface of your cookies are likely to be. Kind of like when we're making brownies and we whisk the sugar and eggs together really well to get that meringue-like top. You'll get something adjacent to that effect if you beat in your eggs really well, which I don't really recommend doing, just letting you know in case you end up with those really crackly tops. Okay, next is our vanilla extract. We're only using a teaspoon of vanilla in this recipe. I like using my real vanilla. It has those little vanilla bean specks. That is not mandatory though. Mix that in. Oh, didn't have to mix that in yet because I wanted to talk about my secret ingredient. The secret ingredient in this cookie recipe is maple syrup. When I was testing this recipe, I thought it would be fun to include a secret ingredient, and I tried a lot of different things. A lot of them did not go well. Maple syrup turned out to be a game changer. It's introducing more sugar into the dough, which really helps with the chewiness, but also the maple syrup flavor adds to the depth of flavor and just gives this cookie an extra something. You don't know why it's so good, you just want to grab another one. I personally do not think this makes the cookie taste like maple syrup at all. All of my taste testers says they can't pick up on maple syrup, they just think it's a really good cookie, but I have had the odd comment that says they can taste the maple syrup. What I think that comes down to is if you're using a pancake syrup that uses a lot of maple extract, that's probably where it's coming through. Pancake syrup actually I feel like works even a little bit nicer in this cookie. You can certainly use 1/4 cup of pancake syrup. The cookies bake up a little bit thicker that way typically, and it's fine. These days I don't keep pancake syrup on hand, I keep real maple syrup on hand and that's what I use, but it does generally lend itself to an even thinner cookie, so just something to keep in mind. I feel like I am talking a lot this video, but there's a lot I want to share with you about how this cookie came to be and why it works so well. All right, everything's nicely combined. You'll need a separate bowl for your dry ingredients, and we're going to start with 3 1/3 cups of all-purpose flour. Next, secret ingredient that I use in a lot of my cookie recipes is cornstarch. We're just going to add 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. This helps thicken the dough a bit and make the cookies chewy without having to add more flour, which can make the cookies a little bit more dry and cakey. We're also adding a teaspoon each of baking soda and baking powder and a teaspoon of salt. Table salt is fine, or superfine sea salt would also work great. And then just whisk everything together. Let's bring back our butter maple syrup mixture, and we're just going to gradually stir in the dry ingredients. So I do this in like 3 or 4 parts. I would never advise eating raw cookie dough because that's not safe, but theoretically, this is the best tasting cookie dough in the world. Once that's nicely combined, let's add our chocolate chips. I recommend semi-sweet chocolate chips. Personally, I think they're better, and I like to use a mix of regular sized and mini, just adds a little bit of variety. When I first wrote this recipe, I called for 2 cups total of chocolate chips, but recently I've kind of scaled that back. I'm only using 1.5 cups right now. I don't know, I guess it's because I just want more dough and less chocolate because this is a really good tasting cookie dough. But I do reserve some chocolate chips over here to press on the cookies after they've baked, which I've shown you in the past. I'll show you again how I do that. All right, bad news. This recipe requires a chill. I told you they're the worst, and they're going to need to go in the fridge for at least 30 minutes. Now, if you want the cookies to be a little bit less thin and more flavorful, chill them longer. They do really well with an overnight chill, or even, I'd say you could make this dough up to 3 days in advance, maybe even a little bit more. And as they chill, the flavor really develops, everything really melds together, and your cookies will spread less. So do with that information what you will. I will see you in 30 minutes, and while the dough is chilling, I'm going to get my oven preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I suggest you do the same. All right, cookie time. It's been about 30 minutes. Let's bake some cookies. So for these, I used to make them a lot bigger, but now I've kind of just been rolling them into about 1.5 to 2 tablespoon sized scoops. It's a little large. And you may recall, I like to roll my cookies into balls. That's just going to make them smoother and more uniform, whereas drop cookies are going to look a little bit more messy. When you're baking your cookies, give them breathing room on the baking sheet. I always recommend at least 2 inches, and that's not because I want to slow you down while you're making cookies. It's because that's going to help them bake evenly. If you put your cookies too close together, they're just going to spread into one messy, flat pancake chocolate chip mess. So give them breathing room. All right, we're going to pop these in the center rack of our 350 degree Fahrenheit preheated oven. They're going to need to bake for about 11 to 13 minutes. When they're finished, the edges will be nice and lightly golden, and the centers should look slightly underdone when you pull them out of the oven. And if you're a cookie perfectionist like I seem to be, you can go ahead and scoot in your cookies so they're perfectly round, or use a pair of spoons if you don't have one of these guys. I keep getting asked about this. I think it's just like a round cookie cutter set. I will try to remember to leave a link to it in the description. But really, you don't have to buy one. A pair of spoons works pretty well to round your cookies too. If you recall, we reserved some chocolate chips from earlier. Adding a few on top really adds a nice bakery style appearance. Optional, but pretty. I did a whole video on how to make your cookies look prettier because this is something that's important to me. We all have our things. And that chocolate will melt and be super melty for a while, and then it'll re-solidify and stay in chip form once it re-solidifies. I was shocked how many people on my brown butter chocolate chip cookies were mad about adding sea salt to cookies. I'm not making you do this, but a sprinkle of sea salt, I think, though some people have different opinions, I think it adds a really nice gourmet touch. This is that Maldon sea salt I talk about all the time. I get mine off Amazon. I've been using the same box for quite a while now. All right, we let these cool completely on the baking sheet. Very important because the centers are slightly underdone. They need to finish baking on the baking sheet. They'll be very fragile right now. Once the cookies are at the point where you're not going to burn yourself and they're not going to fall apart, you can remove them from the tray and enjoy. Just watch out, that chocolate that we added is going to stay melty for a bit, which is kind of nice and delicious. If you've tried this one in the past or you are trying this one now, I would really love to know what you think. I really do love hearing from you. This is my favorite part of the day. Did I mention this is my favorite cookie ever? Like my actual favorite cookie recipe? I have no words. No gourmet cookie will ever match a classic, but better, chocolate chip cookie like this. Ooh, shell was a little tricky. I'm not eating cookie dough. All right, they're going to need to bake 11 minutes. Sorry, I'm eating cookie dough. These look amazing. These look so good. I'm chewing.